Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Today's topic is data is the new oil. You've heard the statement, you've read about the statement many times in the media, as well as you must have listened to many presentations on this topic. Well, why is data called the new oil? Is it really the new oil? And what is the perspective that we can reflect on? Let us look at what I have to share today. This is my perspective based on my learning, my research, and my work. So let's begin. So I have two frameworks which I've prepared to share with you today. So first, data framework takes a historical perspective of the last 40 years of what has been happening in the world of data and data processing. Now, before we begin with data, did you know that in 1976, the first supercomputer, Cray 1, cost $2 million to produce, and all of the processing power of the Cray 1 supercomputer is now available to you on the smartphone that you have in the palm of your hand. So in about 45 years, what cost $2 million, the memory capacity and processing power is now available to you for about $200. That is the quantum leap we have taken in terms of technology and computer science to make available at your fingertip processing power of a supercomputer. Now, what are you doing with this supercomputer in your hand? You are producing data. You, as a human being, you are interacting with the smartphone, which is a machine or a mini computer, and you are producing in this interaction what is called as data. So the interaction between the human being and the smartphone or any machine procreates data. And that is the beginning of the journey of data through what is called as the data value chain. And what is this data value chain? Let's take a look from a perspective of history of the last 40 years. So if you look at this inverted pyramid, data processing started somewhere in the 1980s, first with the government and then with private companies, then with schools and colleges and institutions, and then finally it came into our homes. So in 1980, people were generating with computing power data reports. The computers were used to generate reports. In the 1990s, the computing platforms and the computing systems were able to provide analysis, advanced analysis of the data reports that they were generating. In the turn of the millennium, after 2000, in that decade, we began to see the emergence of data monitoring systems, large enterprise computing applications which were able to monitor, not only report, analyze, but monitor what is happening in a particular system by virtue of processing the data from raw data all the way to reports and information, providing that onto a monitoring platform. In 2010 onwards, in the decade of 2010 onwards, we started to see that the machines, computing machines, were beginning to provide predictive analytics. They were able to provide frameworks with which users could generate their own predictive analytic formats, and the computers were also aiding human beings to start to predict what would happen from the databases and the data sets that have been accumulated over the last few decades. And in 2020 onwards, this is the decade of self-learning. Now we have computing platforms which are able to learn from itself, which are able to produce corrective mechanisms from the learning that it undertakes, from the data that it's processing instantly, simultaneously, and spontaneously, almost like the human brain. And that is why we call this as the age of artificial intelligence, because artificial intelligence is mimicking human intelligence. So, over the last 40 years, this is how data and the computing power and computing capability kept on improving. Now, as this kept on improving, you can see here there are two dimensions that we can consider. One is called as the value insights. What is the power of insights that were being generated? It kept on increasing over the last 4 decades, and people and businesses and the government start to get more value out of the computing platforms. So it's an increasing value of data, value derived from insights from computing platforms, and also the value of impact of these insights kept on increasing over the last 4 decades. And today the impact it has is evident to all of us. There is in a single day petabytes and hexabytes worth of data which is being generated by all the cloud computing platforms across the world because of the internet networked existence that we have. And within 1 hour, we're able to generate a huge amount of insights from the data that's gathered around the world. So this is the age of self-learning. Also, because of the large volume, humongous volume of data that is now come to reside on planet Earth virtually, we can classify this data into 2 buckets. 20% of all data is said to be structured data. Data that's available in a structured format. That means this data is readily available as information and knowledge, accessible to us. And about 80% of all data that's available is unstructured data. Unstructured because this is the raw data that's being generated from all the computing systems in the world. Example for this would be social media. For example, you have an account in multiple social media platforms, and whatever you comment, whatever you like, whatever you watch, and whatever you create are all unstructured data until and unless the computing platforms record that data and convert that data into a proper structured format for analysis and insight generation, and that finally gets into the AI systems for self-learning and producing user-generated user preferences, user-generated preference, and giving you the experience that you are able to enjoy on your smartphone. The system is able to produce the content that you are most likely to like based on your user preference, based on the way you've been using the computing platform on the internet. So this is one perspective, the historical perspective of data. And you can see with this particular short journey that we've taken over the last 40 years that data has become ubiquitous. It is not possible, just like if you are not having fossil fuels today, the entire transportation industry and the entire mobility of vehicles around the world will not be possible. Just as in the same way, without data, we will not be able to run our world today. And that is why the comparison between oil and data. That is why people have started to say data is the new oil. Of course, oil is non-renewable fossil fuel resource. That means once you use the oil, that is you cannot reuse it. It's burnt and it creates pollution. However, data, once you create data, you can harness that data as long as it's protected. You can harness that data again and again. You can recycle data again and again, and then create more value from the same historical data that you own. So there is a very strong similarity, but also there is definitely a differentiation as to what data is and what oil is. So that is one aspect to start to begin to understand about data and how data rules our universe. Now let's take another perspective and understand what is called as the data value chain. In order to understand data value chain, here is a framework that I have created. On the x-axis, you have processing power of artificial intelligence systems if you are dealing with computing platforms, or human intelligence. Because today we live in a world where everything is a combination of the machine world as well as the human intelligence from the human brain. So you have to consider the processing power of AI, which is augmenting the inherent processing power of the human intelligence or the human brain, and both combined I call this as processing power. So processing power as you move on the x-axis increases, this is 0, and the value impact, that is the kind of impact that you can create, the value that you can create, capture and deliver keeps increasing, and this is represented on the y-axis. So when we begin, just as we understood in the previous framework, data when it is created is raw data. It has very little value. It does not have no value. It has value, but it has very little value in its raw format. Now, it can produce some amount of value. So we also looked at what is raw data. So raw data is, for example, let's say your likes on a particular social media platform or your comments on social media platform. That is creating some value in the system, right? Because of your likes, because of your comments, social media engagement increases, the advertising revenue increases, and people in that particular internet economy who are advertising and creating content are benefited from that particular activity. Therefore, raw data has some value. Now, when you move up the value chain, raw data is processed and converted into information. So what is information? Let's take an example. Again, let's come to the social media example. Information is now available that a particular channel on YouTube, let's call it channel ABC. This particular ABC channel has 1,000 subscribers. They have a total of 1,000 videos uploaded, and they have a total advertising revenue of $10,000 every month. Now that information is available with YouTube, and that was created from the raw data that we just discussed. Your likes, the time that you use, that you have watched a particular video, and your comments on that particular channel. And that is called as structured data, because now that information has been put in context to what query a particular person is looking at with regards to YouTube. Now, in the next level of the value chain is creation of knowledge. Now, when we have that information of a particular YouTube channel, and this YouTube channel has so many subscribers, this is the kind of comments that we are receiving. Based on that, we acquire, from the information, we acquire knowledge, and from that particular knowledge, now we can create as well as consume new content. So if I'm a producer of that content, then I'm creating content which is based on the likes I receive and the comments that I receive. And if you are a consumer, then you tend to consume content depending on the quality and the preference of the content that you are consuming previously, and the preference of your consumption and the pattern of your consumption is established between you, the consumer, and the social media platform. And then it starts to deliver to you on demand the preferred content based on your usage history. And this is called as user generated preference. And content can also be user generated, and that is exactly what is happening on social media. You're creating posts, that is user generated content, for example. Therefore, raw data is getting converted to information, information is getting converted to knowledge, and knowledge can be converted to insights. So when you do further processing and you start to look at knowledge in various dimensions, once you understand knowledge and start to begin to understand how computers are making sense of information, you start to raise queries, and from those queries, the human people who are interacting with the computing platforms, the human beings who are interacting, can generate new insights. New insights, that means new understanding, nuggets of understanding from the knowledge that they acquired, from a body of knowledge that they acquired. And what are insights? For example, if I'm a doctor, I have medical knowledge, but the moment I start to practice based on my medical training and knowledge, while I'm practicing based on the patients that come to me, as I treat them, I begin to apply my knowledge in the real world, and I begin to generate my own understanding of what works, how it works, when it works, and why it works. And that is called as insights. And those insights, for human beings, it is proprietary. It is custom made for each human being. Now for machines, these insights become universal. When computers go through the same process, when computing platforms go through the same process, when they try to apply to the real world, they are able to generate insights. And these insights are available to everybody who's accessing the internet. And while I create dots, which I called as insights, it starts to add more value to the entire data value chain around the world. Because these nuggets of information is what people take and amplify in the media. This is what they take and amplify in their research. The insights is what is required for us to make progress in the collective consciousness and the collective learning of human knowledge. And at the highest level, when we start to join the dots differently, when we create new dots and join the dots differently, two things can happen. One, we can start to invent. From zero, from nothing, we can create something. That's an invention. Because we start to see things in a different perspective, until what we saw as an inventor, we are able to see as an inventor, nobody else has seen it, and therefore we have invented something. So there are so many inventions in the world, including the internet that that is the medium through which we are communicating. And then 1 to 1 million or 1 to 1 billion is innovation. I'm able to innovate. Why? Because again, I'm able to see the dots, join the dots differently and create value. So that is how, for example, let's say a Google was created, or Uber was created, or Facebook was created, LinkedIn was created, right? New insights and innovation based on the internet. So internet was an invention. On top of that, innovation was all these social media platform companies which were born. And that is what is called as wisdom. And as human beings and machines, for us to make progress, we need to master the data value chain. We need to be able to process data to wisdom instantly, spontaneously, and the faster we are able to do it, the more wise we become and the more effective we become, and we can continue to grow in whatever we do. So this is the reason why people have been saying for some time now that data is the new oil. I hope you got something out of this presentation. I enjoyed presenting this to you. Thank you very much. May you be peaceful.